The rain in Seoul didn't wash things clean. It only made the neon lights bleed into the asphalt, turning the streets into slick mirrors of distorted color. From the 34th floor of the Hanel Architecture Building, Amira watched the deluge batter the panoramic glass. It felt fitting. The firm, once the crown jewel of modern Korean design, was hemorrhaging money just as fast as the sky was shedding water. Amira turned away from the window, catching her reflection in the darkened glass. She adjusted the collar of her cream silk blouse, smoothing it against her dark skin. She was tired, the kind of tired that settled deep in the marrow, the result of 3 months of fighting a losing PR battle. As the director of public relations, she had spun every disaster into a structural reorganization, every layoff into a strategic pivot. But today, there was no spin left. Today was the sale. "He's here," her assistant Min-jae whispered, rushing into the office with a look of pale terror that seemed disproportionate for a business meeting. "The cars are downstairs, 3 of them, all black." Amira frowned, picking up her tablet. 3 cars for a private investor. Who is this guy again? Mr. Song kept the dossier practically redacted. Ji-hyun, Min-jae said, the name rolling off her tongue with a tremor. "They say he's in logistics and shipping and waste management." Amira let out a dry laugh. "The holy trinity of boring money. Well, as long as his check clears and he lets us build the Obsidian project, I don't care if he made his fortune selling paper clips." She grabbed her files, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor as she marched toward the boardroom. "Pull yourself together, Min-jae. We are selling a vision, not a funeral." But as Amira approached the double doors of the boardroom, the atmosphere in the hallway changed. Usually there was the low hum of chatter, the sound of drafting printers, the buzz of creativity. Now there was silence, a heavy, suffocating silence. 2 men in dark suits stood on either side of the boardroom entrance. They weren't the usual security guards Hanel hired. These men were whiter, harder. They wore earpieces and looked at her not with polite indifference but with a scanning, predatory assessment. Amira held her head high, refusing to shrink. She was a black woman in corporate Seoul. She was used to being stared at, used to standing out. She flashed her badge, though she knew they didn't care about credentials. One of them nodded slightly, opening the door for her. Inside, the air conditioner seemed to have been cranked down 10 degrees. The board members, mostly older Korean men who had run the firm into the ground, sat rigid in their chairs, looking like schoolboys awaiting the headmaster's cane. At the head of the table sat the only person who mattered. Ji-hyun. He was younger than she expected, maybe early 30s. He didn't look like a man who dealt in waste management. He looked like a jagged edge of glass wrapped in Italian wool. His suit was a midnight blue 3-piece, tailored so perfectly it looked like a second skin. His hair was pitch black, swept back but falling slightly over his forehead, framing a face that was devastatingly handsome and utterly cold. He had high cheekbones, a sharp jawline, and eyes that were so dark they seemed to absorb the light around him. He wasn't looking at the financial reports spread out before him. He was looking at her. Amira paused for a fraction of a second, struck by the intensity of his gaze. It wasn't the usual look of curiosity she got, the "where are you from" look. This was a dissection. He was taking her apart, layer by layer, before she had even spoken a word. "Director Amira Williams," the CEO, Mr. Song, squeaked. "This is our head of PR and brand strategy." Ji-hyun didn't blink. He didn't smile. He simply gestured with one hand, a long, elegant hand with a silver ring on the pinky for her to sit. "Ms. Williams," he said. His voice was deep, a baritone that seemed to vibrate through the mahogany table. His English was flawless, accented only by a clipped, precise cadence. "I have heard much about your creativity." Amira took her seat, placing her tablet down. She forced a professional smile, locking her nerves into a box in the back of her mind. "Mr. Min, a pleasure. I hope Mr. Song has walked you through the fundamentals, but I'm here to tell you what Hanel actually is. The numbers tell you what we were. I'm here to show you what we will be." Ji-hyun leaned back, steepling his fingers. The numbers tell me you are a sinking ship, Ms. Williams. A prestigious ship, perhaps, but one that is taking on water faster than you can bail it out. Why should I buy a drowning man a new coat? The board members winced. Amira didn't. She liked a challenge. Because the coat is what makes people believe the man can swim, Amira shot back. She tapped her tablet and the large screen behind her illuminated with the render of their most ambitious, stalled project, the Obsidian Tower. It was a twisting, defying structure of black glass and green hanging gardens, designed to sit in the heart of the Gangnam district. You aren't buying debt, Mr. Min. You're buying legacy. This firm has the contracts, the permits, and the genius. What we lack is liquidity. You provide the floor, we build the ceiling. The room went silent. Mr. Song looked ready to faint at her tone. No one spoke to Min Ji-hyun like that. Ji-hyun's eyes narrowed slightly. For a moment the air was so thick with tension it felt combustible. Then the corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smile, but an acknowledgement. The Obsidian Tower, he mused, looking at the screen, then back at her. It is aggressive, dark, unapologetic. It's a statement, Amira corrected. It says we aren't afraid of the future. And you, Ji-hyun asked softly, ignoring the board entirely. Are you afraid of the future, Ms. Williams? Amira met his gaze, refusing to look away. I create the future, Mr. Min. That's my job. Ji-hyun stared at her for a long, uncomfortable moment. He saw the fire in her. He saw the way she held herself, the contrast of her dark skin against the sterile white of the boardroom, the gold hoops in her ears catching the light. She was vibrant, alive, and utterly out of place in this room of gray men. She was exactly what he needed. To the world, Ji-hyun was a venture capitalist. In reality, he was the head of the Jang Syndicate, an organization that moved billions in illicit funds through the shadowy veins of the global economy. He didn't need a legacy. He needed a washing machine. He needed a business so clean, so high profile, and so complex that the tax authorities and international watchdogs would get lost in the blueprints. He needed a distraction. And looking at Amira Williams, he realized he had found the perfect face for his distraction. She was brilliant, loud in a way that drew the eye, and seemingly honest to a fault. She would be the dazzling light that blinded everyone to the shadows he would cast in the basement. Buy it, Ji-hyun said, his voice cutting through the room. Mr. Song blinked. Excuse me. The firm, Ji-hyun said, standing up. The movement was fluid, like a predator uncoiling. I will acquire Hanul Architecture, assuming full debt and full equity. No layoffs. He turned his eyes back to Amira. On the condition that the Obsidian Tower is the priority, and that Ms. Williams is the one who answers directly to me regarding its progress. Amira felt a flush of triumph mixed with a sudden, cold shiver. She had won. She had saved the firm. But as Ji-hyun walked toward her, the triumph felt heavy. He stopped beside her chair. He smelled of expensive sandalwood, tobacco, and something metallic, like rain on iron. He leaned down slightly, his voice dropping so only she could hear. You have your floor, Ms. Williams, he murmured. Do not disappoint me with the ceiling. He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and walked out, his silent guards falling into step behind him. The heavy doors swung shut, leaving a vacuum in the room. My God, Mr. Song exhaled, slumping in his chair. He bought it. He actually bought it. Amira stared at the closed doors, her heart hammering against her ribs. She should have been celebrating. She should have been popping champagne. But all she could feel was the memory of his eyes, pitch black, bottomless, and the distinct sensation that she had just invited a wolf into the sheep pen. 2 weeks later, the transition was alarmingly smooth. The debts were cleared overnight. The back salaries were paid. The lights in the office seemed brighter, the coffee in the break room more expensive. But the atmosphere had shifted. The top floor, once a storage archive, was gutted and renovated in 3 days to become the executive suite. No one went up there except by invitation. The security in the lobby was replaced. The friendly old guards were gone, replaced by men in suits who never smiled and checked IDs with clinical suspicion. Amira sat in her office, surrounded by press releases. The headlines were glowing. Mystery investor saves Hanul, the obsidian tower to rise again. She was the face of the resurrection, giving interviews to Forbes Asia and Architectural Digest. But she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Her phone buzzed, a single text message from an unknown number. "My office now." Amira frowned. She hadn't been summoned to the top floor yet. She grabbed her notebook and headed for the elevator. When she pressed the button for the penthouse, the lift didn't just ding. It required a key card she had been issued that morning. The doors opened into a space that was less like an office and more like a fortress. It was vast, minimalist, and dark. The walls were gray stone, the floor black marble. One entire wall was a digital display of global markets. Ji-hyun sat behind a desk that looked like a slab of obsidian, staring out at the city skyline. "Close the door," he said without turning around. Amira did. The lock clicked with a heavy, mechanical thud. She walked across the expanse of the room, her heels muffled by a thick rug. "Mr. Min," she started, keeping her voice professional. "The press junket for the groundbreaking is scheduled for Friday. I have the talking points prepared." "I don't care about the talking points," Ji-hyun said, swiveling his chair to face her. He looked tired. There was a bruise on his knuckles, faint but visible, and a tightness around his eyes that hadn't been there 2 weeks ago. "I care about the narrative." He gestured to a chair opposite him. "Sit." Amira sat. "The narrative is strong. We are positioning you as a visionary patron of the arts." Ji-hyun let out a short, cynical laugh. "A patron of the arts, is that what I am?" "That's what the world needs to think you are," Amira said boldly, "unless you want them looking closer." Ji-hyun stopped moving. His eyes locked onto hers. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. And what would they see if they looked closer, Amira? It was the first time he had used her first name. It sounded intimate and dangerous on his tongue. "I don't know," Amira said honestly, holding his gaze. "You're a ghost, Ji-hyun. You appear out of nowhere with unlimited capital, you buy a failing firm, and you turn the top floor into a bunker. If I were a journalist, I'd have questions. But I'm your PR director, so my job is to make sure no one asks them." Ji-hyun studied her. He was fascinated by her lack of fear. Most people trembled when they were alone with him. Even those who didn't know he was a mafia boss sensed the violence in him. But she just observed him with those sharp, intelligent eyes. She was trying to solve him like a puzzle. He stood up and walked around the desk, leaning against the front of it, crossing his arms. He was close to her now, too close. "You are good at what you do," he said quietly. "But you are curious. Curiosity is a dangerous trait in my line of work." "Architecture," she challenged, arching a brow. "Investment," he corrected smoothly. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face for a moment before he picked up a lock of her braided hair, examining the gold cuff at the end of it. The gesture was shockingly familiar, yet possessive. "I need you to handle a dinner tonight. The Minister of Land and Transport will be there. He is reluctant about the zoning permits for the tower." "I thought the permits were approved," Amira said, her breath hitching slightly at his proximity. "There are always new obstacles," Ji-hyun said, his eyes dropping to her lips before returning to her eyes. "I deal with obstacles in my way. You deal with the public face of them. Tonight you need to charm him, make him feel like the tower is his idea." "And what will you be doing?" "I will be ensuring he understands the consequences of changing his mind," Ji-hyun said. The threat was vague, but the darkness in his voice was unmistakable. Amira stood up, breaking the tension. She needed space. He was overwhelming. "I'll handle the minister, but Ji-hyun, if we are going to work together, you need to trust me with more than just the dinner menu. People are talking. The security, the black cars. I can't spin what I don't understand. Ji-hyun's face hardened. He stepped back, the mask of the cold CEO sliding back into place. You understand what I pay you to understand, Amira. The rest is for your own protection. He turned his back to her. Be ready at 7. I'll send a car. Amira walked out of the office, her heart racing faster than it had in the boardroom. She had asked for transparency, but she knew, deep down, she was lying to herself. She didn't just want to know the business. She wanted to know him. And that, she realized as the elevator plummeted down, was the most dangerous project she had ever taken on. Behind her in the silent office, Ji-hyun watched her leave on the security monitor. He touched his bruised knuckles. He should fire her. She was too smart, too observant. But he couldn't. For the first time in years, in a life defined by blood and betrayal, he wanted someone to look at him and see something other than a monster, even if it was a lie he was paying her to tell. The dress Amira chose was not armor. It was a weapon. It was a deep emerald silk that clung to her silhouette like liquid, with a slit that ran dangerously high up her thigh and a back that plunged low enough to make a statement. She wore her hair down in loose, dark curls, and her lips were painted a deep berry red. If she was going into the lion's den, she wasn't going to look like prey. A black sedan idled outside her apartment building. It wasn't the usual company car. This one was armored. She could tell by the heavy thud of the door as the driver opened it for her. Inside, Ji-hyun was already waiting. The interior of the car was suffocatingly intimate. Ji-hyun was on his phone, speaking in rapid, low Korean. His tone was lethal. When he saw her, he stopped mid-sentence. He hung up without saying goodbye, his phone vanishing into his jacket pocket. For a moment, he didn't speak. His eyes traveled from the hem of her dress up to her face, his expression unreadable, though the air in the car seemed to tighten. "Too much?" Amira asked, her voice steady despite the flutter in her pulse. "No," Ji-hyun said, his voice raspy. He cleared his throat, shifting his gaze to the window though his reflection watched her. "It is distracting, which is exactly what we need. Minister Choi is a man of simple vices. He likes beauty and he likes power. Tonight you are both." "And what are you?" she asked, settling into the leather seat. "I am the wallet," he said dryly, "and the hammer if necessary." The car glided through the rain-slicked streets of Seoul, heading toward a private club in Hanam-dong, a district where old money and new secrets lived behind high walls. "About what you said earlier," Amira began, watching the city blur past. "About protection. Who are we protecting ourselves from, Ji-hyun? Is it corporate espionage? Because I've dealt with hostile takeovers before, but I've never seen guards with earpieces checking the flower deliveries." Ji-hyun looked at her, his face illuminated by the passing streetlights. "There are rivalries in this city that predate the architecture firm, Amira. The Obsidian Tower is not just a building. It sits on land that others believe belongs to them. I took it. They are displeased." "So it's a turf war," she deduced, narrowing her eyes. "We're building a skyscraper in the middle of a gang dispute." "We are building a monument," he corrected firmly. "Do not worry about the dogs barking at the gate. I keep the gate." The dinner was held in a private tatami room, overlooking a Zen garden that looked eerie in the night rain. Minister Choi was a man in his 50s, with a face flushed from too much expensive scotch and eyes that lingered on Amira a few seconds too long. Throughout the meal, Amira was the perfect diplomat. She laughed at his terrible jokes, poured his sake, and wove the narrative of the Obsidian Tower so skillfully that by the third course, Choi was nodding enthusiastically. She spoke of green energy, of Seoul as a global hub, of his legacy as the minister who authorized the future. Ji-hyun said very little. He sat like a statue, sipping his tea, his eyes sharp and alert. He wasn't watching the minister. He was watching the doors, the windows, the shadows in the garden. "You know," Minister Choi slurred slightly, leaning closer to Amira, his hand creeping toward hers on the table, Approvals are difficult. There are zoning laws, environmental concerns, so much red tape. He smiled, a greasy, suggestive expression. But for a project with such beautiful representation, perhaps we can cut the tape. His fingers brushed her wrist. Before Amira could pull back, a hand clamped down on the minister's shoulder. It wasn't violent, but it was heavy. Absolute. Ji-hyun hadn't moved quickly, yet suddenly he was there, looming over the seated official. "Minister," Ji-hyun said softly, the temperature in the room plummeted. "The tape is already cut. We are discussing the ribbon-cutting ceremony now, aren't we?" Choi looked up into Ji-hyun's eyes and sobered up instantly. The color drained from his face. He saw something in the younger man's gaze that terrified him, a promise of violence so stark it cut through the alcohol haze. "Yes," Choi stammered, pulling his hand back as if burned. "Yes, of course, the ribbon cutting, a magnificent project." Ji-hyun smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Good. Then we have an understanding. Enjoy the dessert. We have to leave." He didn't wait. He took Amira's elbow, his grip firm, and guided her up. "We haven't finished," Amira whispered as he practically marched her out of the room. "We're done," Ji-hyun said, his voice clipped. He signed the intent in his mind. The paperwork will follow tomorrow. If it doesn't, he loses a finger. Move. "Excuse me," Amira halted in the hallway, pulling her arm free. "Loses a finger. Ji-hyun, you can't just talk like that. This is a government official." Ji-hyun turned to her, his jaw tight. "Amira, get in the car, now." His urgency was real. For the first time, she saw a flicker of genuine alarm in his stoic mask. They exited the club into the humid night. The valet was nowhere to be seen. Their car was idling at the curb, but the driver wasn't opening the door. "Stay behind me," Ji-hyun commanded, reaching into his jacket. "Why, what is?" The sound was like a firecracker popping inside a tin can. The windshield of their car shattered. Amira screamed, freezing in place. "Down!" Ji-hyun roared. He tackled her, slamming her into the wet pavement behind a concrete pillar just as two more shots rang out, chipping the stone inches from her head. Chaos erupted. From the shadows across the street, two men on motorbikes revved their engines, submachine guns resting on the handlebars. They were masked, professional. This wasn't a warning, it was an execution. Amira was gasping for air, the smell of wet asphalt and gunpowder filling her nose. She looked up and saw Ji-hyun. He wasn't cowering. He was standing in a crouch, and in his hand was a sleek, silver semi-automatic pistol. He didn't look like a CEO. He looked like a soldier. He leaned out from behind the pillar and fired 3 times. The shots were controlled, rhythmic. Bang, bang, bang. One of the bikers jerked backward, his bike skidding out of control and crashing into a parked delivery truck. The second biker roared his engine, spraying bullets wildly toward them before peeling off into the night, realizing the target was shooting back. Silence slammed back into the street, broken only by the wail of car alarms. Ji-hyun turned to her. His gun was still in his hand, pointing at the ground. His chest was heaving slightly, his eyes wild. "Are you hit?" he demanded, dropping to his knees beside her. "Amira, look at me. Are you hit?" She couldn't speak. She stared at the gun, then at his face, then at the dead man tangled in the motorbike across the street. You killed him," she whispered. "He was trying to kill you," Ji-hyun said, his voice hard. He holstered the weapon in a fluid motion and grabbed her arm. "We have to go. The police will be here in 2 minutes and my enemies in 5. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she cried, scrambling back. "You're a gangster. You're, oh my God, the firm, the money, it's all fake." "The money is real. The danger is real. And if you stay on this sidewalk, you will be dead," Ji-hyun snarled. He didn't wait for her consent. He scooped her up, ignoring her protests, and threw open the back door of the armored sedan. The driver, who had been ducking, gunned the engine before the door was even closed. The car tore through the streets of Seoul, running red lights. Inside, Amira sat huddled in the corner, shaking. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a cold, creeping horror. She looked at Ji-hyun. He was checking the magazine of his pistol, his face illuminated by the passing streetlights. He looked calm, terrifyingly calm. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Really?" Ji-hyun slid the gun back into his holster and looked at her. The mask was gone. There was no CEO left, just the wolf. "I am the head of the Jang Syndicate," he said. The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. "I bought Hanel Architecture to wash $400 million of cartel money. I hired you because your face is honest and your record is clean." Amira felt like she had been punched. "So I'm a shield, a human shield." "No," Ji-hyun said. He reached out, hesitating, then rested his hand on the seat near hers, not touching her but close enough that she could feel his heat. "You were supposed to be a distraction, a pretty curtain to hide the room behind it." But he trailed off, looking at her torn dress, her messy hair, the fire in her eyes that even fear couldn't extinguish. "But what?" she challenged, tears stinging her eyes. "But you became significant," he murmured. "Tonight wasn't supposed to happen. They weren't supposed to know you were with me." "Who is they?" "The Viper Circle, a rival faction from Busan. They want the Gangnam territory. They want the Obsidian Tower project dead because they know what it represents for my power." "Stop the car," Amira said. "No. Stop the car. I want out. I quit." "You can't quit," Ji-hyun said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Amira, look at me. You were seen with me. You were seen leaving the dinner. You were the target of a hit alongside me. To them, you aren't just an employee anymore. You are mine." "I am not yours," she shouted. "In their eyes, you are," Ji-hyun shouted back, losing his cool for the first time. He slammed his hand against the leather partition. "You are the woman of the Jang boss. If I let you out of this car, they will snatch you off the street within the hour to get to me. Do you understand? You are in this, deep in this." Amira stared at him, her chest heaving. The reality of his words sank in. She was trapped, not by a contract but by blood. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly. "My home," Ji-hyun said. "The penthouse. It's the only place in the city fully secured. You'll stay there until I handle this." "Handle it how?" Ji-hyun turned to look out the window, his profile sharp and ruthless. "By burning the Viper Circle to the ground." The car swerved into the underground garage of an ultra-luxury high-rise. They took a private elevator that bypassed the lobby, opening directly into a sprawling, two-story penthouse. It was a masterpiece of architecture. Amira's professional eye noted the cantilevered stairs and the floor-to-ceiling glass instantly. But tonight it felt like a cage. Ji-hyun paced the living room, pouring himself a drink. He didn't offer her one. He downed the amber liquid in one go. "There is a guest room down the hall. It has a lock. Use it," he said, not looking at her. Amira stood in the center of the room. She was dirty, her dress ruined, her knees scraped. But the fear was turning into something else. Anger, and a strange, twisted curiosity. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Would you have taken the job?" "No." "Then that is why." He turned to face her. He looked exhausted. "I needed you, and I take what I need." "You're a monster," she said. He walked toward her, slowly. The air crackled between them. He stopped inches from her. She could smell the gunpowder on him, mixed with his cologne. It was intoxicating and repulsive all at once. "I am," he agreed. He reached out and brushed a smudge of dirt from her cheek. His thumb lingered on her skin. His touch was incredibly gentle for a man who had just killed someone. "But tonight, I am the monster who kept you alive. Remember that." Amira didn't pull away. She looked up at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. She hated him. She was terrified of him. But God help her, in the dim light of the penthouse, with the city rain lashing against the glass, she had never felt more alive than she did standing in his shadow. What happens now? She breathed. Ji-hyun's eyes dropped to her lips. For a second, she thought he was going to kiss her. The tension was a pulled rubber band, ready to snap. Go to your room, Amira, he said, his voice rough. Lock the door, and do not open it no matter what you hear tonight. He turned and walked away into the darkness of the hallway, leaving her standing alone in the center of his empire of glass and blood. The silence in the penthouse was heavier than the gunfire had been. Amira sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room, still wearing her ruined emerald dress. She hadn't slept. Every creak of the building settling in the wind sounded like footsteps. She stared at the digital clock, 3:14 a.m. She couldn't stay in this box. If she was going to die, she wasn't going to do it hiding under a duvet. She unlocked the door. The hallway was dark, lit only by the ambient glow of the city filtering in through the glass walls of the living room. She found Ji-hyun there. He had shed his jacket and vest. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned, the sleeves rolled up. He was sitting on the edge of the low coffee table, a first aid kit open beside him, trying awkwardly to wrap gauze around his left forearm. Amira froze. There was a long, angry gash running down his arm, a graze from a bullet she hadn't even realized had hit him. "You're bleeding," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet. Ji-hyun looked up sharply, his hand instinctively reaching for the gun on the table before he recognized her. He relaxed, but only slightly. "It's a scratch. Go back to bed." "That is not a scratch. That needs stitches." Amira walked into the room. The fear was still there, buzzing under her skin, but seeing him injured made him seem human again. Less of a mythical monster, more of a man. "I have had worse," he grunted, struggling with the tape. "Stop," she commanded, kneeling in front of him. She took the gauze from his hand. His skin was burning hot. "You're going to get an infection, and then who will protect me?" Ji-hyun went still. He watched her hands, steady, capable, as she cleaned the wound with antiseptic. He hissed through his teeth but didn't pull away. "Why didn't you tell me you were hit?" she asked, concentrating on the bandage. "Because it doesn't matter," he said, his voice low. He was looking at the top of her head, smelling the faint scent of her jasmine shampoo mixed with the metallic tang of the night's violence. "Pain is just information. It tells you you are still alive." Amira tied off the bandage and looked up. They were inches apart. She could see the fatigue etched into his features, the shadow of stubble on his jaw. "Why the obsidian tower?" she asked suddenly. "You have money, you have power. Why go through all this trouble for a building? Why hire me to sell a lie?" Ji-hyun looked away toward the rain-streaked window. "My father was a thug. He broke legs for loan sharks in Busan. He died in a gutter. I built the syndicate to rise above the gutter, but it is still mud. No matter how much money I make, I am still the gangster." He looked back at her, his eyes intense. "The tower is clean. It is glass and steel and light. When I look at it, I don't see money laundering. I see something that will stand long after I am dead, something that doesn't bleed." Amira felt a pang in her chest. It was a twisted, tragic ambition. He wanted redemption through architecture. "You hired me to sell the dream," she whispered. "I hired you because you are the dream, Amira," he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "You are everything I am not, bright, honest, unafraid to look the world in the eye." He reached out, his hand cupping her jaw. His thumb traced her lower lip. The air in the room seemed to vanish. The adrenaline, the fear, the proximity, it all coalesced into a magnetic pull that was impossible to resist. "Ji-hyun," she breathed. "I should send you away," he murmured, leaning closer. "I should put you on a plane to New York tonight, but I am a selfish man." He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, hungry, tasting of scotch and danger. Amira gasped against his mouth, her hands gripping his shirt, pulling him closer. He groaned low in his throat, his arms wrapping around her waist, lifting her easily as he stood up, pressing her against the cold glass of the window. The city lights of Seoul sprawled out below them, a galaxy of neon witnessing their collision. For a moment there was no mafia, no hitman, no lies. Just the heat of his body and the way his hands moved over her, possessive and reverent. When he pulled back, both of them were breathless. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "If you stay," he rasped, "there is no going back. You understand that, you become part of this life." Amira looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the killer, yes, but she also saw the man who had shielded her body with his own. She realized with a jolt that she didn't want the safe life. She wanted the fire. "I'm not going back," she said firmly. "But if we do this, we do it my way." Ji-hyun opened his eyes. "Your way." "The Viper Circle," she said, stepping back and smoothing her dress, her mind already shifting gears from passion to strategy. "They attacked us in the dark. They want you to hide. They want you to look weak." "I will hunt them down one by one," Ji-hyun growled. "No," Amira said, walking over to the desk where the blueprints of the obsidian tower lay spread out. "That's a gang war, that's messy. It scares the investors, it scares the government. We need to end this publicly." She turned to him, a dangerous smile playing on her lips. "The groundbreaking ceremony is in 2 days. The press will be there, the mayor, everyone." "It's a suicide mission," Ji-hyun dismissed immediately. "Too many open angles, sniper lines." "Exactly," Amira said. "It's the perfect bait. If you cancel, you look afraid. If you show up, they have to strike. We turn the ceremony into a trap." Ji-hyun studied her. He saw the shift in her stance. She wasn't the terrified civilian anymore. She was the director of strategy. "You want to use yourself as bait?" he asked, his voice dangerous. "We use us," she corrected. "I control the media. I control the cameras. I can make sure the Viper Circle can't get within a mile of that site without being seen on a live stream. And you do what you do best. You handle the ones who try anyway." Ji-hyun walked over to her. He looked at the blueprints, then at her. A slow, dark smile spread across his face. It was the smile of the wolf realizing he had found a mate with teeth. "You are dangerous, Amira," he said softly. "I learn fast," she replied. The next 48 hours were a blur of calculated chaos. Amira worked from the penthouse, turning the Obsidian Gala into the event of the century. She leaked rumors that a massive international conglomerate was partnering with Hanul Architecture, raising the stakes. She invited every major news outlet in Asia. She created a spectacle so bright that the shadows would have nowhere to hide. Meanwhile, Ji-hyun was a ghost. He spent hours on encrypted phones, his voice low and lethal. Men came and went from the penthouse, hard-looking men with scars and tactical gear. They treated Amira with a newfound respect, bowing deeply when she passed. They knew she was with the boss. On the morning of the ceremony, the tension in the penthouse was physical. Amira stood before the full-length mirror. She wore a suit of white silk, sharp, architectural, commanding. It was a stark contrast to the black suits of Ji-hyun's men. Ji-hyun came up behind her. He was dressed in black as always, but he wore a white tie today, a visual link to her. He checked the pistol in his shoulder holster before putting on his jacket. "The site is secured," he said, meeting her eyes in the reflection. "My men are in the construction crew. They are in the catering staff. They are everywhere. And the Viper Circle. They have taken the bait. My intel says they plan to hit the stage when we dig the first shovel. They want to make an example of me on live television." "Then let's make sure they get their close-up," Amira said, turning to face him. He handed her a small, delicate earpiece. "If I say drop, you drop. You do not ask why. You do not hesitate." "I trust you," she said. He kissed her forehead, a brief hard contact. "Let's go build a legacy." The drive to the construction site in Gangnam was a procession of armored vehicles. When they arrived, the flashbulbs were blinding. The skeleton of the Obsidian Tower's foundation was draped in banners. A massive stage had been erected. Hundreds of people were there, politicians, celebrities, journalists. Amira stepped out of the car and the crowd surged. She smiled, the perfect image of confidence. She took Ji-hyun's arm. His muscles were coiled like steel wire beneath the fabric. They walked the red carpet. Amira fielded questions, laughing, charming, spinning the story of a new era for Seoul. Ji-hyun stood beside her, silent, imposing, his eyes scanning the crowd with a predator's focus. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer boomed, "Director Amira Williams and President Min Ji-hyun." They ascended the stage. The lights were hot. The city skyline loomed behind them. Amira stepped to the microphone. "Thank you all for coming. Today isn't just about pouring concrete. It is about cementing a vision." As she spoke, she scanned the crowd. She saw the journalists. She saw the mayor. And then she saw it. In the reflection of a cameraman's lens, a glint of movement on the rooftop of the building opposite them. She didn't stumble in her speech. She kept talking, her voice steady, but her hand squeezed Ji-hyun's arm tight. 3 pulses, the signal they had agreed upon. "Target spotted." Ji-hyun didn't look up. He barely moved. But into his lapel microphone he whispered a single word in Korean. "Now." Suddenly, the catering staff dropped their trays and pulled submachine guns from under their aprons. The construction workers on the perimeter turned, raising rifles toward the surrounding rooftops. The crowd screamed. Panic rippled through the audience. "Stay with me," Ji-hyun roared, grabbing Amira and pulling her behind the reinforced podium just as the first bullet sparked against the metal, inches from where her head had been. It wasn't just an assassination attempt, it was a war zone. But this time, Ji-hyun wasn't the victim, he was the conductor. From the rooftops, his snipers returned fire. The Viper circle's men, thinking they had the element of surprise, were cut down before they could even aim. "Is this part of the PR strategy?" Ji-hyun shouted over the noise of gunfire, pulling his own weapon and firing 2 shots at a man rushing the stage. "It's definitely memorable," Amira yelled back, crouching beside him, clutching her tablet as if it were a shield. "We need to move to the car. The exit is compromised." Ji-hyun grabbed her hand. They ran, not away from the fight but through it. Ji-hyun was a whirlwind of violence, clearing a path through the chaos. Amira stayed in his wake, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm. They reached the side of the stage, but a black van screeched to a halt, blocking their path. The side door slid open. Amira expected more gunmen. Instead, a man stepped out. He was older, wearing a pristine gray suit. He held a cane, but he didn't look frail. He looked like death. It was the Viper, the head of the rival family. "Mr. Min," the older man smiled, ignoring the chaos around him. "You build very high towers, but you forget to check the foundation." Ji-hyun raised his gun, but he froze. 2 men dragged a woman out of the van. She was crying, a gun pressed to her temple. It was Min-ji, Amira's assistant. "Let the girl go," Ji-hyun said, his voice deadly calm. "An architect needs a staff," the Viper sneered. "Drop the gun, Ji-hyun, or your pretty PR director watches her friend die and then I kill you both." Amira looked at Min-ji, then at Ji-hyun. She saw the hesitation in him. He could shoot the Viper, but Min-ji would die. "Ji-hyun, don't," Amira whispered. Ji-hyun looked at her. A silent communication passed between them. He slowly lowered his gun. "Good," the Viper said. "Now get in the van." They had set a trap, but they had underestimated the cruelty of their enemy. Amira realized with a sinking heart that the PR spin wasn't going to save them this time. They were leaving the spotlight and going into the dark. Ji-hyun dropped his gun. It clattered on the concrete. He stepped forward, placing himself between Amira and the van. "I'm getting in," Ji-hyun said. "She stays." "No," the Viper laughed. "She is the face of the company. She comes too." As they were shoved into the back of the van, the darkness swallowing them, Amira reached out and found Ji-hyun's hand. He squeezed it hard, hard enough to bruise. The doors slammed shut, sealing them in with their enemies. The last thing Amira saw was the unfinished skeleton of the obsidian tower, reaching for the sky, empty and silent. The van smelled of rust and stale gasoline, a stark, suffocating contrast to the leather and sandalwood world Amira had inhabited for the last few weeks. She sat on the metal floor, her white suit stained with grime, her wrists zip-tied in front of her. Beside her, Ji-hyun sat in a similar state, though his posture remained unbroken. He didn't look like a captive. He looked like a king waiting for his court to assemble. Min-jae was huddled in the corner, sobbing quietly. Amira caught her eye and nodded firmly, a silent command to breathe, to hold on. "I'm sorry," Ji-hyun said. His voice was barely a whisper, meant only for Amira. The van bumped over rough terrain, throwing them against the metal walls. "Save the apology," Amira whispered back, shifting so her shoulder pressed against his. "Save it for when we get out." "You still believe we will get out?" He sounded almost amused by her resilience. "I have a press release to write for Monday morning," she said, her voice trembling slightly but her chin high. "I don't miss deadlines." Ji-hyun looked at her in the dim light. The look in his eyes was fierce, a mixture of pride and a terrifying resolve. "If they touch you," he murmured, "I will burn this entire city down to the bedrock." The van screeched to a halt. The doors were thrown open, blinding them with the glare of floodlights. They were dragged out into the humid night air. They were at the docks, an abandoned shipping yard on the outskirts of Incheon. Rusting shipping containers were stacked like jagged teeth against the sky. The smell of the sea was overpowered by the stench of rotting fish and oil. The Viper, Mr. Choi, the uncle of the minister she had charmed, she realized with a jolt, stood in the center of a cleared warehouse. He was surrounded by 6 armed men. A table had been set up with a single laptop and a document. "Welcome to my office," the Viper sneered, leaning on his cane. "Less glass than yours, Ji-hyun, but much more functional." The guards shoved Ji-hyun and Amira to their knees. Min-jae was thrown to the side, a guard keeping a gun trained on her head. "The deal is simple," the Viper said, limping toward Ji-hyun. "You transfer the deed to the obsidian land to my shell company. You transfer the offshore accounts. And then I let the women go." Ji-hyun looked up, his face a mask of boredom. "You and I both know you won't let anyone go, old man. You kill me, you have to kill the witnesses." "Perhaps," the Viper shrugged. "But maybe I keep the pretty PR director. She has talents. I could use a better image." He reached out, the tip of his cane lifting Amira's chin. Amira flinched but didn't look away. She stared right into the Viper's watery, cruel eyes. "Don't touch her," Ji-hyun warned. The air in the warehouse seemed to vibrate. The guard stepped closer, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "Or what?" the Viper laughed, pressing the cane harder into Amira's skin. "You are bound. You are unarmed. You are nothing but a boy in a suit who forgot the rules of the street." "I didn't forget," Ji-hyun said softly. "I just evolved." "Sign the transfer," the Viper shouted, losing patience. He signaled a guard who racked the slide of his pistol and pressed it against Min-jae's temple. Min-jae screamed. "Wait," Amira yelled. "Wait, he can't sign it." The Viper paused, looking down at her. "What?" Amira's mind raced. She needed time. She needed a distraction. She needed to do what she did best, spin a narrative. "The accounts," she lied, her voice breathless. "They are biometrically locked, dual authentication. He needs me to unlock the server from the PR side. It's a failsafe we installed last week." Ji-hyun remained silent, but his eyes flickered toward her. He understood. Play along. The Viper narrowed his eyes. "Is this true?" "Why do you think he keeps me around?" Amira scoffed, forcing a tone of arrogant derision. "For my looks. I manage the encryption keys. If you kill her," she pointed at Min-jae, "or him, the money vaporizes. It goes to a charity trust in Switzerland. You get nothing but dirt." The Viper hesitated, Greed warred with suspicion on his face. He lowered his cane. Unbind her hands, bring her to the laptop. A guard sliced the zip tie on Amira's wrists. She rubbed her chafed skin, standing up slowly. She walked to the table, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked at the laptop. It was open to a bank transfer page. "Do it," the Viper commanded, standing right behind her. Amira placed her fingers on the keyboard. She wasn't a hacker. She was a PR strategist, but she knew something the Viper didn't. She knew Ji-hyun never went anywhere without a backup plan. She looked at Ji-hyun. He gave a barely perceptible nod. He was shifting his weight, his muscles bunching. He was waiting for the eyes to be off him. Amira typed, but she didn't type a password. She opened the command prompt and typed a broadcast message to the firm's emergency server, a system linked to the security details phones. SOS. GPS active. "What is taking so long?" the Viper hissed. Leaning closer. "The system is slow," Amira said. Then she turned to him, a smile cutting across her face. "Just like you." She grabbed the heavy metal laptop and swung it with all her strength, smashing it into the Viper's face. The crunch of bone was sickeningly loud. "Now," Amira screamed, diving under the table. Chaos exploded. The distraction was milliseconds long, but for a man like Min Ji-hyun, it was an eternity. In the moment the guards looked at their screaming boss, Ji-hyun moved. He didn't need hands. He launched himself upward, his legs scissoring around the neck of the nearest guard. With a brutal twist of his hips, he snapped the man's neck and used the falling body as a shield against the gunfire that erupted. "Minjai, get down," Amira yelled, crawling across the dirty concrete toward her assistant. Ji-hyun was a blur of violence. He rolled, grabbing a knife from the fallen guard's belt. He sliced his own bindings in one fluid motion. Now he was free. Now he was the wolf. He moved with a terrifying grace, dodging bullets, closing the distance. He didn't fight with anger, he fought with efficiency. Slash, punch, shot. He took a gun from a second guard and fired 2 precise shots into the chest of a third. The warehouse echoed with the deafening roar of gunfire. Amira grabbed Minjai, dragging her behind a stack of crates. She saw a loose metal pipe on the ground and gripped it, her knuckles white. A guard flanked them, raising his rifle. "Bitch." Amira didn't think. She swung the pipe like a baseball bat, catching him in the knee. He buckled with a howl. Before he could recover, Amira brought the pipe down on his head. He crumpled. She stared at the man, panting, adrenaline searing her veins. She had just taken a man down. The shooting stopped. Silence returned to the warehouse, heavier than before. Amira slowly stood up, looking over the crates. The Viper was crawling across the floor, blood streaming from his broken nose, reaching for a dropped gun. A black leather shoe stepped on his hand, crushing it. The Viper screamed. Ji-hyun stood over him. He was covered in sweat and blood, mostly not his own. His white tie was undone, hanging loose around his neck. He looked down at the older man with cold, abyssal eyes. "I told you," Ji-hyun said, his voice devoid of emotion. "The Obsidian Tower is the future. You are the past." "Ji-hyun, please," the Viper gargled. "We can share." "I don't share," Ji-hyun said. He raised his gun. "Ji-hyun," Amira called out. He froze. He didn't look at her, but he didn't pull the trigger. Amira walked out from the crates, stepping over the debris. She came to stand beside him. She put her hand on his arm, the arm holding the gun. "He's finished," she said quietly. "The police are coming. I triggered the silent alarm. If you kill him now, it's murder. If we leave him for them, it's justice. And we keep the narrative clean." Ji-hyun looked at her. The adrenaline in his eyes slowly faded, replaced by something warmer. He looked at her bloodied suit, the pipe still in her other hand, the fierce set of her jaw. He lowered the gun. "You triggered the alarm?" he asked. a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I'm the PR director," she said, dropping the pipe. "I handle crisis management." Ji-hyun holstered the weapon. He leaned down to the whimpering viper. "You live because she says you live. Remember that in prison." He straightened up and turned to Amira. He didn't care about the bodies, the blood, or the sirens wailing in the distance. He grabbed her face in both hands and kissed her, hard, desperate, affirming life in the midst of death. "Are you hurt?" he asked, pulling back to scan her. "I'm fine," she said, though her knees were shaking. "Minjai is in shock, but she's okay." Ji-hyun wrapped an arm around her, pulling her into his side. "Let's go home." 6 months later. The night sky of Seoul was clear, the stars fighting a losing battle against the city lights. But tonight, the brightest star was on the ground. The obsidian tower was complete. It spiraled into the sky, 80 stories of black glass and vertical gardens, a twisting monolith that defied gravity. It was beautiful. It was intimidating. It was iconic. The launch party was on the rooftop terrace. It was the most exclusive event in Asia. Champagne flowed like water, and the jazz band played soft, sophisticated tunes. Amira stood at the edge of the terrace, looking out at the city. She wore a dress of shimmering gold, her hair swept up, diamond earrings catching the light. She was no longer just a director. She was a partner, in every sense of the word. Thinking about the spin, a deep voice asked behind her. Amira smiled, turning around. Ji-hyun stood there. He looked different than he had 6 months ago. The darkness was still there, deep in his eyes, but the weight of it seemed lighter. He wore a tuxedo, the fit perfection, but on his finger he wore a new ring, a gold band that matched hers. "The narrative is set," Amira said, stepping into his space. "Hanul architecture is the savior of the skyline. Min Ji-hyun is the visionary philanthropist." "And Amira Williams?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Amira Williams is the woman who tamed the wolf," she teased. Ji-hyun laughed, a real, genuine sound that vibrated in his chest. "Tamed, is that what you call it?" "Managed," she corrected. "I manage the asset." "The asset is very grateful," he murmured, leaning down to brush his lips against her neck. The Viper Circle was gone, dismantled by the police and the remnants absorbed by Ji-hyun's legitimate enterprises. The money was clean. The blood was washed away. But Amira knew the truth. She knew that beneath the tuxedo, the scars were still there. She knew that they walked a fine line between the light and the dark, and she knew that she wouldn't trade it for anything. "Are you happy?" Ji-hyun asked, pulling back to look at her. He asked it seriously. Amira looked at the tower they had built. Then she looked at the man who had burned down half his world to keep her safe. "I have the love of a dangerous man and a view of the city I conquered," she said, resting her hand on his chest over his heart. "Yes, I'm happy." Ji-hyun kissed her, a slow, lingering kiss under the lights of their empire. "Then let them talk," he whispered against her lips. "We have a lot more to build." Amira smiled, turning back to the party, her hand firmly in his. The obsidian tower stood strong against the wind, dark and beautiful, just like the love story that had built it. The end.